and welcome to episode 57 of the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Paul McCormack. Paul, how are you doing today?
Thanks for having me.
Amazing, awesome. And as always, we'll start with the question. Paul, in your own words, what makes you...
So honestly, that's a question that I'd never thought of the answer to until you asked me onto the podcast. And I suppose there's a really simple answer and a more complex one. So I'll try to do both. If I was being asked this question in an exam, I would answer because I'm an adult human male. But then the other answer to the question is probably the same answer to a different question, which is what makes me human. And that's the fact that I've got conscious thought and I'm driven by love and connection and growth and learning. And I want to be a better person for myself and my family. And there's certain traits that I utilize to achieve that. Some of which are more commonly associated as being masculine, like inner strength, and others are kind of more commonly associated with being feminine, things like empathy and vulnerability.
Awesome. Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do in the space that we...
Yeah, definitely. So, well, I think the first thing to say is I'm a performance coach for people who are looking to get better results for themselves. I've obviously got a very kind of propensity to lean towards the alcohol-free lifestyle, as that's what's been so impactful for me. But yeah, I ended up in this space really by mistake almost, but a bit of an accident because, I was kind of going along in my career, marketing professional, kind of working on numerous different startups and businesses across kind of the UK and Australia. And it wasn't until I changed my relationship with alcohol back in 2020 that it kind of set me on this path to where I am now. And it's funny because I wrote an ebook a few years ago, and it's probably something we'll go on to in a bit, but that's called Leaving Booze Behind. But up until about a week before I released that, it was called I Quit Alcohol by Mistake. Because that's essentially what happened. I never intended not to drink alcohol again, but I just couldn't ignore all the benefits that happened for me. And it set me on this path of self-development and kind of growth and learning. And because the changes were so profound for myself, I thought, God, there's going to be other people here who are probably unwittingly trapped under the same glass ceiling that I am. And I felt like it was my duty to explore that and help others try and break through that and become better versions of themselves. So in a very quick roundup, that's kind of where or how I got to where I am.
Yeah, as we spoke before, I'm sort of on a little bit of a sober journey myself, sort of coming up to Christmas, which is a well-known time for drinking. But yeah, I've done just over 100 days now, about 130, I think, in total. What is sort of the main reasons that people are, I guess, drawn to alcohol in the first place?
Oh, wow, that is such a complex question. So I think it's different for everyone, right? But I speak about it in my book for myself, and I try to break it down and understand for myself what it was that attracted me to alcohol. And I opened the book with talking about my first memory of it. And that is sitting at the Christmas dinner table at my grandparents' house. And there was the adults table and there was the kids table, right? And the adults have all got their wine and their champagne. But my gran, bless her, she always wanted to make sure that the kids were, fitting in and didn't feel like they were different and kind of made us join in the fun. So she had put plastic wine glasses on the kids' table, and we had that grape juice, Schlur, I think that's how you pronounce it. I could have got that completely wrong, but the sparkling grape drink. And we would, sit and drink that, and we'd get high on E numbers and sugar, and the adults would get, drunk on their alcohol. But we were kind of mimicking them, and that was something that we were kind of copying them and doing what the grown-ups did. So then it kind of, I think at that point it became ingrained to me that alcohol was something that you earned with age. You weren't allowed to do it till you were 18. Obviously, a few people, myself included, did it a couple of years before that, first experiences. But it was something that your parents maybe did. You're watching TV shows and movies. All these people did it. You've got high performers like, surgeons and detectives and doctors, and they're all kind of having a glass of wine or pouring a scotch or whatever during stressful situations, or to relax. So it was that kind of thing that you've kind of watched people do it as you grow up. It's everywhere that you look. It seems to be a rite of passage, certainly in the UK, I found. So that was kind of my introduction to it, and then obviously, as you get to that age where you are having a couple of drinks, it becomes a bit of a social lubricant, right? And something to help you not be as as anxious and kind of worried, and all the emotions that are going on when you're a teenager, you're going through puberty and everything that's happening. You're trying to talk to the opposite sex or the same sex to try and get a partner, and it's something that helps you do that initially, or so you seem to think. So, and then it just becomes a habit, I suppose, and I think that's why, certainly for me, that was my experience of being introduced to it.
Yeah, when you said that, I thought you were going to say 14 down the park, big bottle of cider, but you you went younger than that, which I never really thought of as well. I suppose it's just the norm, like you say, just to be there. I guess this is a really nice sort of time for you to sort of explain the kind of people that you work with, right? Because we obviously, when I'm talking about alcohol, we're talking about it from a more, let's say, casual perspective rather than a
absolutely. And I think that's a really important point to make, Lewis, that the easiest way to describe who I do work with is to describe the two types of people that I don't work with, and that is anyone who doesn't drink alcohol, and anyone who is physically dependent on alcohol. So it's everyone in between. So whether that's, someone having a glass of wine a night, or every couple of days, or someone who binge drinks on the weekend, or uses the weekend as that time to open a bottle of wine or 6-pack of beers, whatever it is. So it's those people who are conscious that they're doing that, and conscious that it could potentially be holding them back, tripping them up, making them feel like they're not living up to their full potential, making them feel like they're not present with their kids at the weekend, making them feel like they're struggling and working a Monday morning, maybe Monday and Tuesday, or you're playing catch up, and you only end up working 3 days a week really to your full performance, and then the weekend comes again and that cycle starts all over again. So essentially, I think I kind of to have a tagline of who I work with, it would be growth-minded men who are looking to improve their performance, and that's essentially who I look for. And kind of clients have ranged from finance partners to MDs, business owners. It really depends, but it's those people who are looking for that extra level of performance and have kind of understood that alcohol could be holding them back, but they may have potentially tried to cut back in the past or cut down in the past, and they've not been able to do that for an extended period of time. And what I almost always find is that's because of one real reason, is that people are using willpower to refrain from drinking. And as good as willpower is for certain things, it's terrible for long-term behavior change. I kind of liken it to trying to climb a mountain in flip-flops. You're only going to get so far, and it's definitely not fun. So what you need to do is reframe your mindset around what alcohol is and the role it plays in your life. And once that is done, you're then in full control of why and when you drink. And that to some people is absolutely priceless.
Well, you obviously mentioned sort of the people that you work with, but I think realistically that's probably a lot of men sort of dreading Monday, probably maybe drank too much over the weekend, or even still had a few drinks on Sunday and sort of gone into Monday, and yeah, just been a bit of a waste day, and then playing catch up on Tuesday. Probably a very common story for a lot of people listening. So I guess in your expert opinion, what is the sort of first step for someone who's listening to this going, yeah, that's me, I would like some little tips and tricks to sort of get me
Yeah,
started
I
on this
think
journey?
the first thing to do is to acknowledge that it is something that you're looking to change. The best way to do that is first of all to yourself, but then to your loved ones as well, or those closest to you, or those who are really able to help you and support you. If you are making that lifestyle change, and for a lot of people, it can be a really big lifestyle change. So, saying it out loud, and having that accountability with someone else, and then the really simple things of, get rid of the alcohol in your house. Just for whatever period that's going to be, make sure that there's not that temptation there for when times that you maybe are using willpower. You don't want to have that temptation in front of you. So clear out the alcohol there. And then one thing that is really powerful, and something that I was only introduced to and utilized for myself a couple of years ago, is the power that journaling brings and the introspection that it allows, and kind of just writing down how you feel on a day. And that could be one line of, I really want to drink today, or I'm missing it because of X, Y, Z. But try and understand where that's coming from, why you would want to usually have a drink, and understand, is it because you want to relax? Is it because you're going out for an event, you want to socialize? Is it because you're celebrating? How do you feel about not having a drink tonight, potentially? And then the next day, if you've managed to stick to that, how did you feel in the morning? How was that different from if you were to have had a drink in that moment? So really kind of doing some introspection, keeping consistent, having that accountability, clearing out the alcohol when you're in your home, and yeah, I'm going to be biased here, but obviously working with someone who can help you through that, because what you find is, and it's a classic story for lots of people who have taken a break from alcohol. They find themselves with so much more time, so much more energy, so much more drive and ambition and determination. And they're like, what do I do with all this? And probably that time might be the kind of healthiest period of someone's life, both physically and mentally. So it's trying to then divert that into something that really helps you. So a lot of people go on incredible fitness journeys, lose lots of weight or complete marathons or whatever it is. So try and have something to channel all that extra time, energy and motivation into, and someone who can help eke that out of you as well, because you'll start to get to a point where you gain this incredible clarity when the kind of alcohol kind of leaves your system, and you can understand what it is that you want to do, how you want to do it, and working with someone like a coach is a real kind of quick way to get you there. And I always say that people might say, "Oh, I don't need a coach. I can do this all on my own," and that's completely true. But you also don't need running spikes to run the 100 meters, but it's going to help you and it's going to get you there faster, and that's what I liken it to.
Yeah, well, obviously I've spoken to a lot of coaches, and I think one thing that they sort of echo, which seems to be common, is that there is no secret sauce. It's just a case of me being there allows you to actually achieve, and being held accountable, and being in the you're making a commitment to do this, right, by bringing someone else along for the journey. So yeah, I get it. It's definitely a big help, but you can do it on your own, but there's definitely easier ways to the finish line, as you say. One thing you mention is alcohol acting as a social lubricant, and I like I mentioned, few days into this, and I've been on a few sober dates, and the first one was nerve wracking. It was something that I didn't know what to do. Like, that it would normally be, let's go for a drink, right? So Uh, there's obviously other social occasions like birthdays and stag do's and stuff like that. So, what's your experience when it comes to being less alcohol or during your alcohol break in those sort
Okay.
of scenarios?
Well, firstly, I'm going to tell you a story about a time when I wasn't alcohol free. And I was a single man, and I was going out on some dates, and I plucked up the courage to speak to this girl who worked in this kind of shared office that I was in, and we agreed to go out on a date. And as you do, like you said, you go to the pub, right? And that's what happens. That's how you do first dates in the UK. It tends to be. And we, that was all good. We got there, and then I ordered a gin and tonic, and I was like, what would you like? And she was like, oh, I don't drink. And I'm ashamed to admit at the time, I was like, what? You don't, what? How's this, A, how's this date going to work? And B, how's this potential relationship going to work? Like, I just can't imagine, being with someone who doesn't drink. It was so alien to me at the time. I look back on that now and I laugh. But it would be fair to say that at that time, I couldn't see a potential future with that person, because drinking alcohol, not just on a date, but it was just so ingrained in who I was and how I used to enjoy relaxing on a Friday and a Saturday. So that's a bit of an admission there of what I was like before I had decided to change my relationship with it. And then I actually outlined this in my LinkedIn profile about all the milestones that you go through when you stop drinking, right? Because a lot of people will do dry January, right? They'll do the 30 days. No one does anything in January. Everyone is, well, not everyone, but a lot of people have been, in silly season, drinking a lot, finishing up work, being really stressed. And in January in the UK tends to be pretty miserable. People are wanting a little bit of downtime. So it's easier to do dry January because there's not a lot of things going on, right? You can become that hermit for 4 weeks. You can use that willpower for 4 weeks and not have a drink. So that's certainly something that a lot of people do. And I used to do 1 month sober each year, for the backwards reason that, and it used to be in October, right? I used to do sober October. And it was for the backwards reason that I knew I was going to be drinking most weekends in November, December, and January. My birthday's in November, my sister's birthday's November, silly season, December, Christmas, New Year, all that. And in January, when I lived in Australia, was obviously summer, right? So you've got your barbecues and your lawn bowls, and you're doing all those things that are usually involving alcohol. So that was my experience of doing the 30 days. But since I have been alcohol free, I reached all those milestones, like your first trip to the pub without drinking, and navigating that when everyone else has got a beer in their hand and you don't. And I think it's really important to do those things and set yourself those challenges. You shouldn't shy away from them, because actually those are the things that give you the currency, if you like, that you're able to do more of them. The thought of going to the pub and not drinking, was alien to me before I did it. And then you go and you realise, oh, actually, I've driven there. I've spent less than, half the money I would have normally spent. I've actually had some really good conversations with people. I've left at a time when it was appropriate for me to leave, to get home, to get to bed early, to have a good sleep. I've got up the next morning and I've gone to the gym. That was actually pretty good. I'll do that again, and that gives you that currency, right? Then you have your things like your first birthday without having a drink, and you kind of navigate that. How do you celebrate your birthday? Usually I'd have, my favourite bottle of wine, or have a glass of champagne, whatever it was. Things like your first wedding. Those are usually the biggest one for people, right? And that was for me. I remember the first wedding I did without a drink, and I was pretty petrified before. I was like, how am I going to get through this day? It's a long day as it is, right? How am I going to get through it without having a glass of alcohol? And funnily enough, I was put on a table. This was probably obviously orchestrated, but I was put on a table with someone else who didn't drink. So there's us two, and then maybe 8 other people. And the topic of not drinking was what everyone was talking about at that table. And everyone else was like, do you know what, I'd really like to give it a try. Like, how are you feeling? I've thought about doing it, blah, blah, blah. And that was really interesting insights from me to understand that even people who are continuing to drink are really interested in not drinking. So I tackled that one. But the biggest one for me was my own stag do, right? I had been alcohol free, it must have been 2 and a bit years at my own stag do. And I by that point, it was a clear choice what I wanted to do, but I thought maybe I would want to have a drink at my stag do just to get through it, because I knew that my friends were going to put me through the ringer.
I think a caveat's needed there, right? What a true British stag looks like.
Definitely, it's to make the groom as look as silly as possible, and basically to take the piss out of him for the whole duration of that trip. So, and we'll get onto that in a second. What I did decide to do though was I said, okay, there was 2 nights in the trip. We went over to Berlin, and we did a football match at the Olympus Stadium, and we got there on the Friday, and I said, if I don't have a drink tonight, then I'll prove to myself that on a stag do I don't need to have a drink, and then I likely won't have one tomorrow night. So that was all I did. I concentrated on not kind of feeling like I had to have one on the Friday night. And we watched lots of football. Everyone else was drinking steins. We had a great time. I had lots of fun. I woke up the next morning, FaceTimed my dad, let him know that the first night was a massive success. Had myself a pan of chocolate, a coffee, and went back to the hotel and caught up with the lads, and we went again the next day. Now, the next day I was I was dressed up as what can only be described as a pretty little German girl, with a dress on and pigtails, and we marched off to the Olympus Stadium to watch a Bundesliga game with 80,000 other German football fans. And as someone who is an introvert and doesn't like being centre of attention, wearing what I was wearing and not drinking on that day was probably the biggest test of all time. But do you know what? I really enjoyed it. It was really funny. I just embraced everything about it, and just had the funniest day of my life. And yeah, just proved to myself what I already knew, that I didn't need alcohol to have fun, and to enjoy myself. So it was a very long-winded answer to that question, Lewis, but hopefully that gives you an idea.
Well, no, yeah, I'm going to request some.
There may be 1 or 2 in circulation, yeah.
Locked around. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. Like I say, I'm coming up to Christmas. Literally, the last time I drank was when England lost in the Euros final.
Sorry about that, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not a massive football fan, so it doesn't really affect me in any way, shape, or form. So that's like a big drinking event, I guess, and I actually drank at it. And now I guess the next one is Christmas, and I'm like, originally I was going to start drinking again, but I think I've decided more recently that I'm not going to drink. But it begs the question, when you're setting a sort of break from alcohol, so when you're working with a client, then what sort of time frame are you looking to set from a break? And then on the other side of that, how many people do break that with a celebratory glass of wine, or how many people stick at, you know what, I'm going to do some more?
Yeah, and that's it's a tough one, because as the alcohol-free coach, I should never dictate to someone how long that break is for. For some people, it might be, they're looking to do a week. Others, it's the 30 days, and for others, it might be 3 months, because I've heard that's kind of the sweet spot, if you like. I would encourage people to try and do the 90 days. because I feel like at that point you've given your body the chance to experience fully the physical benefits of not drinking. I've read some kind of research to say that actually it takes between 4 and 6 months for you to truly be yourself if you've been a relative, on the heavier end of a middle lane drinker, if you like. So there's that. But also, I think it takes time to both have those physical benefits and time to work on the mental side of things as well. And I don't think that you can make lasting change without doing both. So I would say to people, the break is entirely up to you how long it is. I'll help you and support you with whatever that is. But if you're serious about maybe making this a longer term change, then that 3-month period is a good one to aim for. What I would say is 99% of people, and myself included, and I alluded to this earlier, who do take a break from alcohol have absolutely no intention of that being a permanent thing. And people don't go into it and say, right, I'm giving up, that's me done. It's usually, let's test this out. How long can we do this for? How long can we live the benefits for? And then you put yourself in a position where you take a step back and you go, right, I've got all the facts. I've lived the benefits. I've reframed the mindset. I know the consequences of what happens if I do decide to have a drink, and then you're in full control of why and when you have that drink. So, for example, I've had one of my first clients agreed to 30 days and stuck to that, and that was all he did. And then I think afterwards he was like, God, I must have been quite a difficult person to coach, because I really didn't want to have the break. I wasn't quite ready yet, but I powered through. And then you've got other people who more recently have said, right, I want to come in and do that 3-month period. And they've got there and then they've kept going. I've just actually spoken to a client that I recently worked with, and he said he ended up doing 5 months. And then he had a drink with some friends. Made that, I think his goal was until he lost a certain amount of weight. Or a certain period of time, he would then have a drink. So I think he lost 8 kilograms in the space of 5 months, decided he was going to have a drink to test it. And he said, do you know what? It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I've now made some rules for myself of when I'm going to drink. And what he's done is he said, in December, he wants to have a drink. And a couple of other months throughout the year, like his birthday and sometimes over summer. And he's like, so he has done exactly what I hope people get out of working with me, and that's being in complete control of why and when you drink. And whether or not that's going back to your old habits, or whether that's doing something like I've just explained, or whether that's like myself deciding that, at the moment, I don't think I'm going to have another drink, then that's really open to the individual person.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Chris Williamson on Modern Wisdom, I think he'd recently come out and said he's got some rules around his drink. Obviously, he's famous for being in the nightclub industry and doing a 1,000 days sober whilst working in it, which obviously is basically going out every night, right? He lists similar things. He's like, I think he went to a concert in Nashville and he was like, I'm not drinking there and stuff like that. So rather than doing it for set periods, it's more a case of now I have control over it. It's almost like a reset almost. Is that that's a nice. I guess one question is sort of around generational. So you mentioned your upbringing and the fact that you were sort of around alcohol from an early age, and your gran sort of fake gave you alcohol, if you like, in that scenario. We're starting to see that younger generations are less interested in alcohol. And do you think if more people start to take similar journeys to yourself or on that side of things, do you think that's sort of the way that it's going to go, or do you see something else happening with the sort of drinking?
Yeah, and there's been some really interesting observations on that recently. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it, right? So I think the younger generations are drinking less because there's more information out there about the kind of the negative effects of drinking. But also, I do think that social media has got a lot to do with it in other ways. I think potentially these younger people have got older brothers and sisters or whatever, and they've maybe seen them, drunk and being caught on camera, in compromising situations and things like that, and maybe thought, God, with the way that the world is so digital, everything's on film at the moment these days, it seems they don't want to be caught in that position. But also the massive push on mental well-being, on physical fitness, and I think it's much more understood now that drinking alcohol is not conducive to peak performance in humans, both mentally and physically. And I think people are much more inclined to be as physically and mentally healthy as they can be. So they're making that conscious choice based on what the information is now out there about alcohol. But it's interesting. I speak to the older generations, right? In fact, I'll give two examples here. One, when I was going through my own alcohol-free kind of journey at the very beginning, I watched 114 YouTube videos between months 1 and 4. Because I was just constantly trying to remind myself of why I was doing this. Because at some points I felt restricted. What am I doing? So I had to keep watching these videos. And I always remember this one guy, and he said, I didn't have a drink for the first 18 years of my life. He's like, then I drank till I was 36. So I've had a good 18-year period of drinking. He says, maybe I won't drink for the next 18 years. And then when I'm a pensioner and my responsibilities are a little bit less again, I'll maybe decide to have a drink again. And I always found that fascinating and was, just intrigued by that notion. But then you speak to people like my dad and his generation, and they potentially have been drinking in the middle lane for 40 years, 50 years. And it's a case of, they go, oh, well, why would I change now? Right? I'm too far gone. I'm coming towards retirement or whatever it is. So those people think that it's not a change that they need to make because they've been doing it for so long, and they've gone through that life, that period in their life when they have to be at peak performance and they have to be on top of their job and their family and what have you. Having said that, my dad actually did. I convinced him to not. It was kind of just through my own journey. He saw how it was so profound for me. He's like, do you know what? I'm going to give it a go. And he gave up drinking for a year, and he had a glass of champagne with on his 70th birthday not so long ago. But I did a LinkedIn post and a picture of him. Side by side. I think it was only 3 months, and he looked like a different man at 69. Lost all the weight, colour in his face returned, just looking more vibrant and healthy. And it took 10 years off him. So then you've got people in that generation who are thinking that maybe it's not something they would consider, but actually there's so many benefits for anyone, no matter what age you are. But yeah, the younger generations, I do think are more into the kind of health and wealth, the healthy lifestyle, and also that's been fueled by the kind of alcohol-free drinks industry. If you go back, 5+ years ago, the only option really might be a little bit longer, but one of the options was the Beck's Blue, right? And Andy Ramage always, I think he makes this joke that it was the kind of the dusty, warm Beck's Blue that was just put in the fridge about 10 minutes ago that you would have to order as the alcohol-free option. So people didn't want to drink the alcohol-free options. Whereas now you've got incredible, brands like you've got Lucky Saint leading the charge on the kind of the draft pints in the UK. You've got brands like Days and Unlimited who are producing fantastic kind of alcohol-free beer and lager options. So that is also fueling the desire and want not to drink, because there are other great options.
Yeah, well, I guess that, there's also the middle ground as well, isn't there? There's a lot of low alcohol options as well. I think Hell's has released like a shandy can that's like a brand that's like a few percent, which I don't know what the difference between 5 and 2.7 is. If it's not worth going that low, you might as well you need to go the full hog. I don't know the ins and outs, but I know there's options out there for less hard stuff, shall we say, in, in that regard. One thing that you touched on that's really interesting is obviously sort of your dad's group and maybe a little bit younger, and just to sort of tie it in nicely with the theme of the podcast, which is obviously around men and men's mental health. There's obviously sort of the big elephant in the room, which is, if I give up drinking, am I going to lose my friends? Because for a lot of those men, that's their third space. That's where they meet. They meet in the pub. They might talk about the wife annoying them, the kids annoying them, X, Y, and Z. So I guess, what's your views on that? And also, what are your reassurances for people that still want to give this a go, even though they feel they may lose some friends?
And that's a worry for even people of my age, right? And that was certainly something that crossed my mind when it was happening to me, when I was going through that journey. The first thing to say is that if you lose friends over the fact that you're not drinking alcohol anymore, those are not your friends. Those are drinking buddies, and quite happy to lose drinking buddies if that's the case. Especially, talking about the older generations, as you pose the question, if those have been your mates for 30, 40, 50 years, they're not going to disown you for choosing to have a Guinness Zero in the pub as opposed to a normal Guinness. And if they do, then, good riddance almost, I would say. The great thing about what I mentioned just a moment ago is the fact that we have all these great alcohol-free options now. So you can still go to the pub, you can still have that place as the place where you meet. You can still feel part of the gang, if you like, by ordering something that comes in a pint glass as opposed to in a bottle or a kind of tumbler. And
Yeah.
like, paradoxically, you have much more in-depth and meaningful conversations when you are sober. Yes, okay, sometimes it might help as a social lubricant initially, but actually the conversation goes in tangents and then people repeat themselves, and you go over the same ground, or you forget what you were talking about. The football's on the TV, you get distracted by that. But actually, if you're there to have that connection and to share those stories and what have you, then being present and sober is the best way to do that. So yeah, for me, there's actually benefits from not having a drink if that's what you're looking for from your group of friends.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say. It comes in a pint glass. There's a theory, well, not a theory, it's a study that's been done on cocktail menus, that you can increase the sales of cocktails to men by putting the shape of the glass next to what the cocktail is, because they will order it based on the glass that it comes in rather than if it's like, but that's why a lot of men drink mojitos, because at least it comes in a straight glass with no umbrella, is the theory. But yeah, so yeah, the alcohol options is definitely a big one for sure. I think Guinness Zero is actually really tasty. It actually tastes like Guinness. Every Irish person that ever listens to this podcast
Yeah.
will no longer listen to it.
Listen, I think from my perspective, Guinness Zero is the best alcohol-free version of an existing drink that I've seen. And then you've got also your brands, as mentioned earlier, like the Lucky Saint Days and Limited, who are great alcohol-free options in their own right. But yeah, I think Guinness Zero is as close to the real thing as any other brand has gotten to, and especially when you can get it on tap. I went to Belfast a couple of years ago, and yeah, sat and maybe had 6 or 7 of them on tap. It was delicious.
Nice. Yeah, no, I agree. It's a nice one. I guess sort of the majority of the clients that you work with are men. We've obviously touched on that sort of third space and things like that. You're obviously a coach. Primarily, the idea of the alcohol free is that it's the kickstart to start creating that free time, to start creating that goal and that drive, it's not about, you're not just there to stop people drinking alcohol. I think it's important to sort of clarify with that. So I guess in your expert opinions of dealing with men and sort of living in the space as well, what is it that you've seen that you think is doing really well, and what do you want to see more of?
Yeah, great question. And for me, about 2 years ago, I didn't actually know fully what a coach was. I had an idea of it, and my kind of blurred vision of it was probably what you describe more as a mentor, right? I thought it was someone who kind of had all this wisdom and experience and told you what to do. That's just not the case. When you work with a coach, it's all about the person being coached. All the answers are within. The coach just holds that safe space, asks the right questions, and holds you accountable. And the reason I say that is because there's now the ability for so many more people to have access to coaching. Previously, it was maybe reserved for executives and CEOs and the likes, and that's people who had access to it from a kind of career perspective. But actually, the skill set of coaching is so powerful for anyone living their life. And now with the kind of, the ability of anyone to, post online and be on LinkedIn and other, social media channels, and actually speak to men and get them bought into the idea that coaching is something that can really help them. So I think the availability of any day or everyday people to have access to coaching is something that I'm really kind of happy about, and kind of I've had such a profound experience. So probably only changing my relationship with alcohol is the only other thing that's been so positive in my life as to actually working with a coach. I've got three. I think I've got three at the moment, all doing different things for me, and it's just been incredible. So I think having access to coaches is really, really important. And then I think that you kind of hear the narrative that kind of men in masculinity are having an identity crisis, and I think coaching is a fantastic tool to help anyone gain clarity on who they are, what they want, and how they can work towards it. So I think that's how it ties in. And then in terms of what's I've noticed doing really well in the space, or something I'm really excited about, I'm going to have to give a shout out to Nathan Jefferson, who's building Dadversity, which is the free online university for dads to improve their professional, personal, and parenting skills. And I think that's awesome. He's teamed up with a whole host of coaches who are giving dads advice on finances and health and fitness and parenting and all these kind of wonderful things that you suddenly need to get a real grip on when you become a father. And there's also a lot more being shared about the science of male mental health as well. Another shout out to Ryan Park, and I know that he's been on the podcast before as well. But he's done a lot of great work on, understanding men and testosterone and how that plays such an important part in men's mental health. So, I think those would be the three things that I'm really excited about and that people have access to now, which potentially wasn't available before.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, Ryan comes up a lot on this podcast. I mention him a fair bit. I think he's doing some amazing work, and I'll check out Nathan as well for sure. I think I've come across him on LinkedIn. I think I think we're in conversation at least. But yeah, no, that sounds amazing. It's always good to. I'm a big fan of pointing to the right people and different people. I think everyone learns and gets from different people, as you sort of alluded to with your three coaches. The more the merrier. So it's a good thing. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'll leave the final thoughts with yourself. Also let people know where they can find you. And obviously you mentioned your book early on in the podcast, so let them know where to find that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, Lewis. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation. I am a one social platform man. I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I kind of post my daily content. So it's Paul McCormack. And I do have a new landing page that's just been set up, which is introducing my kind of my program that helps men kind of reframe alcohol and gain complete control of it so they can access peak performance. And that is thetacticalbreak.com. So people can go there, and there's a 15-minute video of me explaining kind of what I do. And I'll give it a quick plug now, but basically I've got a I describe alcohol as being like a puzzle that we have to solve, right? Because most growth-minded men have a love-hate relationship with it, and I kind of come up with this equation that helps solve it, and it's interrupt plus reframe plus rebuild, which gives us control, and that's based on Kurt Lewin's change model of freeze, unfreeze, refreeze. And then you take the control that you've got, you add action, and you times it by consistency. And that gives you peak performance. And those are the 6 stages that we run through in my program to help men gain complete control of whatever their middle-lane alcohol habits are, and actually push forward and access that level of performance that potentially wasn't there, and help them achieve whatever they want to achieve in life, whether that's in or out of work.